All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating document. It's basically a blueprint for a financial deal on a scale that's, well, it's hard to even wrap your head around. We're talking about a proposal to move multiple trillions of euros in a way that's completely different from the normal banking world. So, let's get into it.
So right off the bat, the core claim here is pretty staggering. This document presents a plan to move trillions of euros with, and this is their term, zero risk for everyone involved. We're talking governments, central banks, the whole shebang. The immediate question is, how on earth could a deal this big have zero risk?
And just to give you a sense of the scale here, the document says the money would move in chunks, or tranches, of 400 billion euros. And that's not the total amount. That's just for one single transfer. This isn't just big money. This is a number so huge, it basically challenges how our financial systems are even supposed to work.
Okay, to make sense of this whole thing, we're going to break it down into 5 parts. First, we'll look at what this trillion-euro download actually is. Then, we'll get into the weird mechanics of how it's supposed to work. We'll identify who needs to be involved, what they all get out of it, and finally, what the document says needs to happen for this to even get off the ground.
So what's the big idea here? At its core, the proposal is for a direct download of an enormous amount of money. The stated purpose is twofold: funding huge humanitarian projects, and just as importantly, injecting what the document calls massive liquidity into a nation's economy and its banks. All right, now for the really interesting part. How do they plan on moving all this cash? And the document is very clear on this. It's not your typical bank transfer, not even close. You know the SWIFT system, right? The messaging network banks use to send money internationally? Well, this document basically says, nope, not going to work. It calls it the classical system and says it just isn't built for these kinds of numbers. Instead, it proposes something called DTC, Direct Transfer of Cleared Cash. This is described as a server-to-server transfer designed specifically for these gigantic sums.
Now, the key to this whole DTC method is a concept they call off-ledger funds. So what does that even mean? According to this paper, these are fully cleared, totally legal funds that come from something called private placement programs. But here's the kicker. They supposedly exist outside the normal, everyday banking ledgers. They're held in reserve until they get downloaded, at which point they become on-ledger and part of the real-world money supply in a bank. The M0 reference is interesting too. That usually means physical cash, so it seems to imply these funds are as good as gold, ready to be activated.
Now, obviously, you can't just move trillions of euros without getting a few key people to sign off on it. The document is super specific about who absolutely has to be at the table for this to work. It's not a suggestion, it's a requirement.
And here's the lineup. You need a major commercial bank to act as the facilitator. You need the national government of whatever country that bank is in. You need that country's central bank. And since we're talking about euros, you also need the European Central Bank involved. And of course, you have the fund owner and their foundation, the ones who are putting the deal together. This is a full-blown public-private enterprise.
And this right here is maybe the most important rule in the entire playbook. The document says it over and over again. There has to be full alignment between the bank, its government, and its central bank. This relationship has to be perfect, verifiable, and collaborative. In other words, if these three aren't best friends on this deal, the whole thing is dead on arrival.
So you get all these powerful players in a room. Why would they even do this? What's in it for them? Well, the proposal lays out what it calls a grand bargain, where every single participant gets a huge, specific benefit.
To make it really clear, the document gives us a concrete example. Let's say we're talking about a 2 trillion euro download. How does that pie get sliced up?
The split is pretty straightforward. Of that 2 trillion, the fund owner keeps 1.2 trillion. Then 400 billion euros goes directly to the national government. Another 400 billion goes to a foundation for all those humanitarian projects. That 400 billion for the government, that's the bait. That is the massive direct reward for their cooperation.
And just as you're taking in those mind-boggling numbers, the document hits you with its boldest claim again. It insists that for the bank, the central bank, and the government, there is zero financial risk, no liability, and no exposure. They get the reward, but they carry none of the risk.
So you might be wondering, wait, where's the bank's cut in that chart? Well, they don't get a percentage. Their reward is something different, something arguably more powerful. By accepting this deposit, the bank is flooded with unimaginable liquidity. Its status in the global financial world would skyrocket. It would become a financial titan overnight, able to fund almost any project it wanted.
Okay, so we're at the end of the proposal, and it wraps up with a very clear list of demands, a sort of, here's what we need from you before we can even start talking seriously list.
It boils down to 3 key things they need in writing. Number 1, written proof of that rock-solid relationship between the bank, the government, and the central bank. Number 2, they need the name of the bank you're proposing and its home country. And number 3, everyone involved has to confirm, in writing, that they get it, that this is not a normal deal, and they're on board with the unconventional process.
So there you have it. A detailed, if highly unusual, plan to inject trillions of euros into an economy. It promises immense rewards with zero risk, all based on a financial system that operates way off the beaten path. Which, of course, leaves us with the big question. Is this a revolutionary blueprint for a new kind of global finance, or is it just a deal that sounds way, way too good to be true?